Fox News continues to shoot themselves in the foot by inviting on rational, moral, logical speaking people to tell us about the shooting in Minnesota. Let's take a listen.
So what's funny to me is when is violence, when is protest, when is this all acceptable?
But isn't that the same though? Where's the protest against the regime that's killing people in the street right now? I mean, I don't see anybody at Columbia.
Well, they're doing those today, and it's called the ICE protests.
Well, but they talking about Iran at the ICE protest?
No, I think they're talking about the regime that's shooting people in the face. I mean, I think it's a very American idea to not want police forces to be able to shoot Americans indiscriminately. And the idea that J.D. Vance says is that they should have absolute immunity. You know, I thought this guy was a hillbilly. He had a book, Hillbilly Elegy. And I can tell you, hillbilly values, at least from where I'm from in Appalachia, are that the government ought not be able to have absolute immunity when they shoot you in the face. But maybe we came from a different Appalachia.
Okay.
Pretty basic stuff here, I think, Mike. The people who are fighting tooth and nail for the Second Amendment, don't tread on me, no to government tyranny, now are cheerleading a government that is sending federal troops masked, unidentifiable, to neighborhoods across the country. It just seems like we live in this topsy-turvy world where nothing makes sense anymore, but it's nice to hear some refreshing remarks from Corbin here. What did you make of what he had to say?
I think he brought up some great points. This whole idea of it's funny because you could kind of flip the script on Fox a bit here, which I'm surprised he didn't really try, but you could, where, they say, hey, how come people aren't protesting about what's going on in Iran? And it's like, well, because they're protesting about what's going on in Minnesota. Like, America first, right? This is supposed to be, we're going to take care of our own stuff before talking about things overseas and whatnot. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting parallel. But yeah, I think Corbin brought up some great points about how even in Iran, they're killing these protesters. Well, now you have a man who killed a protester. So the scale might be different, but the act is still the same. And for him to also cite that J.D. Vance was saying, well, now you have absolute immunity applying, is crazy, because that means they can just murder you and they cannot be held accountable because it was in the line of duty. That's crazy. As long as they clock in, they can kill you, basically, is what J.D. Vance is saying. Which is completely un-American. That's part of why America revolted in the first place, is we said no to tyranny. So I think that when you mentioned these "don't tread on me" people, Emmanuel, I think that's an interesting observation as well, because I've always wondered that about gun owners in general. I don't have a problem with people owning guns, but I do think gun control is something that, we should be better about than we are. I don't know what the answers are. I'm not too big on guns, but clearly there's room for improvements. But the common thing that I always hear is like, I need it. I need my gun because there's going to be tyrannical governments, and this is for self-defense and blah, blah, blah. That's why I need an AR-15, so that when, the stormtroopers come, I'm ready. Well, the stormtroopers are here. And they're going door to door soon, as J.D. Vance said. And that's like full-blown Gestapo at that point. So I think Corbin brought up a great other point as well in the beginning of that clip, where the anchors were kind of talking over him, so it might not have been that clear to hear. But he asks, when is it okay for violence and protesting like this to happen? It seems that we have very different ideas of when this is acceptable from very different groups. And that's kind of strange, isn't it? And I think that's a great question to be asking. I think that's a very important and relevant discussion that we need to be having as a whole, as a country, because I'm not a fan of violence. I pretty much never advocate for violence. But at the same time, when you have tyranny, at some point there is a tipping point where violence is the answer, and that's a question of when is that and how is that. And I think it's a very serious topic that needs a lot of deliberation. But one thing that does concern me, especially within the gun owning, gun toting, Second Amendment, anti-tyrant kind of group, is like, hey man, you're seeing warning signs all over the place that this is coming. and you guys aren't like practicing. You're not doing militia drills. You're out there, cheering it, if anything. So that's the part that I find very interesting, because if you truly felt like tyranny was coming, which many of them don't for some reason, but nonetheless, like, now is the time to have the militias ready. Now is the time to be making preparations, but we're not even really seeing that as far as I can tell. So it does concern me that I've always thought, oh, well, we'll never have another civil war because we have an armed populace, and things won't get that bad because the citizens will fight back if they did, and it's going to create too much chaos, and nobody's going to want to do that. But the reality is, we're still seeing that tyranny take place, and it's only getting worse and worse and worse. So that means if we don't jump out in front of it sooner, it's only going to get worse later. And again, just to be clear, I'm not saying by jumping out now, that means getting violent. I'm just saying that we need to have checks and balances now to avoid any kind of violence. But as far as figuring out when those distinctions are, I think Corbin brought up a great point, which is, when is it acceptable? When is it okay? Because protesting like this and breaking the law, I would argue, if you're breaking traffic violations by protesting, that's okay. You can take a ticket. You can't take a bullet. So, to sit here and say that she broke the law and she made bad decisions and that's why she got shot, it doesn't matter if she broke the law. That doesn't deserve a death penalty. It's clear as day.
Well, we did see these massive protests over the weekend in various cities across the U.S. Minneapolis, of course, New York City came out, San Diego, Chicago, North Carolina, a whole bunch of places were out protesting over the weekend for this shooting, about the shooting. And I think that's one way to fight back, is to protest peacefully, as been done. Thousands and thousands of people came out. And this year is a midterm election year. So, the primaries are coming up in just a few weeks. Another way to fight back politically. And it's not looking good for Republicans. And even they are admitting it themselves. We just did a video on that not too long ago. Republicans are looking scared for the midterms, as they should be. We just had the special elections a couple of months ago, and that was probably a taste of what's to come, sweeping across the nation, really, the blue wave. I mean, the Mamdani win was massive. Even with Trump backing Cuomo, which who would have thought that would have ever been a thing. We had the wins in Virginia. We had the Miami mayoral race, just all go Democrat. So spectacular wins there. And that was just a few weeks ago. So 2026, I think, is shaping up to be quite the battle. And we'll see what happens. Look, what Corbin said, I think was completely logical. I don't think anyone could hear what he was saying and think he said anything crazy or out of the blue or anything like that. It made perfect sense. And I really love the Fox anchor's reactions to what he was saying with that stone cold, like, silent look of speechlessness. I think that pretty much says it all right there. Like, they weren't exactly prepared for the logical remarks that they got, but that's Fox News for you.